Impulse is the architecture of the modern mind. It sits elegantly disguised as intuition, urgency, or necessity. The anatomy of impulse is something you can map if you observe closely. A trigger, external event, or internal memory. An affective surge, fear, longing, urgency. A thought narrative that justifies immediate action, and then the behavior. The critical observation is that most impulses follow the same trajectory. When you learn the map, you can reroute your behavior. First, notice triggers. A message chime, an embarrassed flash from childhood, a compliment, deadline pressure. Any of these can light the fuse. The trigger is often small and unremarkable. A notification ping makes your breath shallow. A glance from someone you love floods the stomach. The mind interprets, and in the gap where interpretation meets action, habit steps in. Then there is the feeling, a hot, body-felt signal. Panic, excitement, shame, hunger, loneliness. These states are ancient. Their neurochemical logic evolved to resolve immediate threat or necessity. But in modern life, the ancient circuitry is often misapplied. You feel loneliness and your brain suggests connection through social media. You feel boredom and the brain suggests consumption. You feel fear and the brain recommends immediate avoidance. Next comes the intellectual mind retrofits reasons to what the body already signaled. I must act now. If I don't buy it, I'll lose it. If I don't apologize, they'll hate me. Because thought loves narrative coherence, it will concoct moral or practical rationales for the impulsive strategy. These rationales feel convincing precisely because they stitch together body and context into a convincing story. Finally, behavior follows. This behavior sleepwalks in the modern infrastructure of immediacy. A click, a text back, an impulsive purchase, a quick promise, small acts that carve grooves into identity. Over time, these micro-choices aggregate into macro outcomes. You may not regret one small impulse, but habitual impulse becomes the scaffolding of a life you did not intentionally design. What hijacks choice is not the impulse per se, but the lack of skill to notice it midstream. If the mind recognizes the trigger and the felt need, it can interrupt the sequence. But that requires training. It requires a pause, a name, a reframe. For example, I feel hurried. Name it. That alone modifies the physiology. Then ask, what will this action cost me in a week? If you still want it after the gap, act. But most impulses dissipate after simple noticing. Discerning impulse from intuition is crucial. Intuition often arrives as a quiet clarity, a felt alignment that persists without frantic energy. Impulse is noisy, anxious, and urgent. Intuition sits steady. The difference is felt more in the chest than in the brain. Learn to trust the physiological distinctions. The gut that tightens is usually impulse. The heart that expands calmly is usually intuition. Gut culture magnifies impulsivity. Platforms, markets, and social systems reward the quick reaction. Design matters. The apps you use, the work rhythms you accept, and the social norms you emulate all shape the triggers. Wise living includes curating the environment, muting notifications, creating friction for purchases, setting decision windows for major categories, and refusing the tyranny of immediacy. Make it harder to act impulsively. Make it easier to pause. Finally, remember that impulse is not only external. Memory does the same work. Old patterns shaped by early wounds show up as suggestions in the present. A childhood reprimand can erupt as a hot need to prove yourself at 50. Familiar affect is like a booby trap. You step on it, and the old wiring fires. Understanding your history transforms how you see impulses. They are often invitations from past selves trying to be soothed. The skill is to soothe them in ways that do not commit to long-term harm. The anatomical map of impulse gives you practical agency. Name the trigger, breathe, delay action, reassess with the body's signals, create structural friction for big decisions, develop rituals that allow the wiser self to speak. With practice, the impulse loses its coercive power, and choice reclaims its sovereignty. Modern consciousness privileges thought as if the mind invented meaning, but the body is an archive of knowing that predates language. The gut, the breath, the chest, the face, they carry early wisdom encoded by evolution, experience, and subtler attunement. Listening to the body is less New Age fluff and more an attention to data. What your system registers before your mind spins a story. Start by noticing the tone of a decision in the body. Is there a tightening behind the sternum, a sinking in the gut, a warm expansion in the heart? These sensations are discriminative signals. They tell you whether a possibility aligns with your biology and psyche. A no often arrives as a constriction, a yes as a softening. Learn these languages. The breath is an excellent barometer. When you breathe high and fast, the sympathetic nervous system is engaged. Fight, flight, or freeze. When you breathe slow and deep, the parasympathetic system calms, and the body can access broader intelligence. A decision made with tight breath is rarely rooted in integrative wisdom. Pause, breathe, then reassess. Emotion provides texture. Fear, shame, longing, joy, each has a physiological signature. Shame constricts and hides. Longing pushes outward to close voids. Recognize whether you are choosing to avoid pain reactive or to approach a well-measured growth creative. Many good opportunities are actually avoidance strategies when taken from a wound. The body often knows the difference. The heart carries a type of knowing that cognitive frameworks cannot supply. Practices that cultivate heart listening, contemplative prayer, loving kindness, meditation, focused gratitude, create access. The heart's intelligence is relational. It senses rightness in terms of whole systems, not only personal advantage. When you habitually check the chest space, decisions begin to scale toward wholesome outcomes. Interoceptive training, the practice of observing internal sensations, grows sensitivity. Simple exercises help. Close your eyes, place one hand on the belly, one on the chest, and track subtle changes as you imagine a decision. Notice whether the body quivers with anticipation or drowns in tension. Write it down. The more you map these bodily cues, the more they become reliable advisors. A caution: bodily sensation is not infallible. Pain from trauma or chronic stress distorts signals. If your system is alarmed constantly, it will mislabel many choices as threats. Part of the work is calming baseline physiology, sleep, movement, nutrition, and psychotherapy. When the nervous system is regulated, the body's intelligence becomes clearer. The body also holds wisdom about timing. Sometimes the internal sense says not yet. Respecting that is different from fear. It's the difference between simmering and burning. Waiting becomes active when it's informed by bodily cues, not idle avoidance, but a stewarding of energy, allowing the right conditions to coalesce. Embodied decision-making integrates three registers: cognitive, emotional, and somatic. The modern mistake is to elevate cognition and neglect the other two. When they work together, you get better choices: thoughtful, resonant, and sustainable. Finally, honor the body as moral teacher. It often tells the truth about how a decision will affect relationships, stamina, and long-term capacity. When decisions are repeatedly made against bodily wisdom for hustle, approval, or escape illness, resentment, and breakdown follow. The cost is steep. Listening to the body is not soft spirituality. It's radical self-care and ethical stewardship. Practice the pause. Listen to breath. Map sensations. Let the body be your first counsel. Over time, decisions will feel less like battles and more like alignments. That is the gift of embodied wisdom. Choices that sustain rather than devour you. There is a strange moral panic embedded in Western life. The belief that delay equals decay. We treat time like currency to be spent quickly, and we confuse promptness with moral worth. But time contains its own intelligence. Waiting can be a form of discernment, not abdication. Learning to wait without panic is one of the finest arts of adulthood. First, understand that some decisions benefit from maturation, not because outcomes are uncertain, but because your capacity to hold consequences grows. Many early marriages, rapid career shifts, and frantic purchases collapse, not from wrong intent, but from lack of maturity. Patience cultivates context, additional data, emotional regulation, relationship testing, and the unforeseen factors that distinguish durable choices from expedient ones. To wait without panic. Cultivate trust in process. This is not naive faith. It's a pragmatic acknowledgement that time yields information. A waiting posture allows for pattern recognition. You notice how people show up, not just in grand moments, but in minutiae, how they respect privacy, how they speak of others, how they handle small disappointments. Patterns reveal integrity. A practical ritual is to create decision checkpoints, not a single yes, no day, but a series of observations over weeks or months. Track behavior. Notice whether initial promises persist. Create a slow rhythm such that the decision reduces to a question of fidelity rather than passion. If the thing still calls across months with consistent signs, it is likely aligned. If it fades, you have saved yourself from a costly misstep. Waiting also requires tolerance for ambiguity. The mind loathes not, it wants a story. Tolerating ambiguity is a skill. Sit with attention without inventing premature narratives. Use breath, community, and journaling to hold the liminal space. The nervous system learns to bear the unknown and, in time, can access wiser impulses. Another practical tip: define what constitutes sufficient information. Waiting can be abused as avoidance. To counteract that, set explicit criteria for action. If a job offers X, Y, and Z, if a person behaves with a B, C over 3 months, then move. The criteria keep waiting disciplined and prevent it from becoming a fear-based stall. Recognize the social pressures to hurry. Family, peers, and institutions use scarcity stories to compress your timeline. Learn the art of saying, "I'll decide when I'm ready," with calmness rather than defensiveness. Boundaries in timing protect the integrity of your life. Waiting is also a spiritual practice. In many traditions, patience is a virtue precisely because it aligns you with deeper flows. Waiting teaches you to value readiness over urgency, alignment over appearance. It shifts the currency of life from immediate gain to long-term integrity. Finally, consider the ecological angle. The world you co-create with your decisions lasts for decades. Acting hastily compounds into a system of reactivity. Waiting, when wise, builds resilience, relationships that can weather storms, careers that align with purpose, investments that mature ethically. This is not about risk, it's about stewarding consequence. Practice the wait, make it structural. Celebrate not only decisions taken but the courage to delay. There is dignity in saying no to frenetic speed and yes to thoughtful timing. You will find the life you prefer is built with less haste and more fidelity. We are a chorus of inner voices. Some are tender, integrated, and patient. Others are ancient alarm systems that shout to keep you safe. Learning to distinguish the inner guide from fear is crucial to wise decision-making. It's the difference between a counsel of depth and a tyrant of panic. The inner guide speaks softly. It often arrives as a clear impression, a steady calm, or a felt resonance. It invites and suggests rather than orders. It may say, "This aligns," or "Not now." It rarely terrifies you. Fear, by contrast, is loud, repetitive, and often linked to imagery of loss or catastrophe. Fear uses must and now. The inner guide uses can and when. Training discernment involves 3 practices: naming, testing, and calibrating. Name the voice. When you feel pressure, identify. Is this voice demanding or inviting? Next, test. Simulate the scenario and observe your system. The guide tends to steady, fear tends to constrict. Finally, calibrate. Review outcomes where you followed one voice versus the other. Patterns emerge. Another method is conversation. Talk back to the voices as if they are different people. Ask fear to describe its worst-case scenario. Ask wisdom to outline the reasons for its quietness. This externalization creates clarity and weakens automatic compliance. You'll notice fear is often repetitive and circular. Wisdom is contextual and explanatory. Cultivate environments that amplify the inner guide. Time in nature, contemplative routines, trusted elders, and a stable body base all make wisdom more audible. Conversely, stimulants, exhaustion, and chaotic company amplify fear. The world you live in constructs which voice wins. Beware of false sages, social media gurus. Charismatic pressure and groupthink can masquerade as inner guidance. The inner guide values your wholeness. External loud voices often value conversion. Practice aligning advice with embodied resonance. If public counsel conflicts with your felt sense, temper action until alignment appears. Finally, note that wisdom and fear sometimes collaborate to produce prudence. Not all fear is destructive. It can highlight real risks. The discerning heart knows when fear is a legitimate alarm, requiring caution, and when it is a habitual bully, demanding misplaced safety. The line is subtle and learned with humility. Honoring the inner guide is an act of self-trust. It's an ethic of listening more than commanding. When you move from that center, your decisions gain not only efficacy but grace. People sense it. Outcomes tend to stabilize. The world responds to a grounded agent differently than to a frantic actor. The last movement is integration. To live as someone who habitually chooses from silence. That life is quieter externally but more powerful internally. Choices made from stillness carry a trajectory. They compound, They compound into reputation, into relationships, into a body of work that they become the form out of which a legacy emerges. Acting from stillness does not mean perpetual inaction. It means timing, precision, and fidelity. Action becomes like the single stroke the master craftsman makes, deliberate, economical, and nearly effortless. This economy of movement spares energy wasted in second-guessing and repair. It allows you to invest in what matters long-term. 3 habits cultivate action from stillness. First, ritualize pause. A corporate contract includes a waiting clause. A communication is prefaced by a grounding breath. A relationship choice is preceded by a reflective question. Second, align your daily practices, somatic care, contemplative silence, and honest feedback loops. These maintain a nervous system that can hold stillness under pressure. Third, create structural fidelity, explicit values, clarified priorities, and a few non-negotiable boundaries. Observe how a life built from such choices looks different. Opportunities are less frantic and more fitting. The people who come into your orbit are those who respect rhythm and depth. Your work quality improves because you commit to craft rather than trending novelty. Your relationships deepen because you negotiate time, presence, and expectation carefully. At the level of community, people who choose from stillness produce healthier cultures. Teams that pause to align before decisions are less prone to churn. Families that model measured response produce children less prone to anxiety. Nations would be steadier if leaders paused more. The ripple effect of quiet choices is social. Finally, there is a moral dimension. Living from stillness cultivates integrity. Your words match your actions. This trust is the currency of lasting influence. People remember how you stood in pressure, whether you rushed, flinched, or held the ground with dignity. Quiet choices tend to be the ones that honor the vulnerable and the long-term, so practice a life architecture that makes stillness habitual. Reward the pause, celebrate the well-considered no, teach others to respect it. The quiet life is not a withdrawal from responsibility, it is a high-capacity way of stewarding it. When you live this way, the decisions you make are less draining and more generative. They carry through seasons and shape a life that is coherent, beautiful, and finally, true. The universe notices, people feel it, your own soul rests. Before you make another decision, take the small, brave step. Be still, listen, let the better voice speak, then act. The world you build will thank you, and you will find that the most important choices were never about speed. They were about the courage to wait for truth.